Hey everyone, it's Yue from the Strictly Broken YouTube channel, and today I am finally, after I think a little bit over a month now, I'm going to be doing the deck profiles for 3 of the Sword Art Online decks that changed after the latest Sword Art Online Alicization Volume 2 set came out in Japan. So there were 2 main decks that I was testing on stream, twitch.tv/SBTCG. You guys should definitely check that out. We stream live gameplay and set discussions, rating shows on that channel. So it's really cool. So I was playing most of the Alicization lists on stream, but in my off stream, I was playing this list, which is the 8 standby old SAO deck that was enabled from Alicization Volume 2 because they printed new standbys. And so the main problem that SAO had before was that there was only 4 standbys available. Now we have 8. And so this deck came to fruition and is actually really good. I definitely think so. One of the selling points 8 standby SAO has over other standby decks is that the standby list can play a very strong counter because it's a splittable counter that can get you value in multiple lanes off one counter. That's a tool that SAO has as a standby deck that other standby decks just don't have because they're printed newer. They don't make splittable counters anymore. So that's the selling point. Also money counter. SAO standby has just the true money counter, and you can really take advantage of that because standby definitely is a strategy that doesn't really use your hand as effectively as what standby can bring out. So your hand can just hoard money counters, and you can usually blank like an entire end game because you're holding like 2 or 3 money counters in your hand. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into this profile. The other 2 I will be posting on the channel as well, so stay tuned for that. But this is the updated old good stuff's 8 standby SAO that has no new cards except for 4 standbys. So unfortunately there's not that many new stuff, but it is what it is. Starting off 4 clean cuts. This doesn't change. This card's really good. You can a lot of times standby decks have the problem of you want to standby to front row because then your standby can get like tanking value, but it's like if you standby to front row, you can't actually do that without blanking a lane, right? Because if you play the standby, so you never go into a battle phase opening up a lane like without a lane because you want to attack 3 times a lot of the time. But what's nice about clean cut and a 3/5 powered clean cut that gets a little bit even bigger is that let's say you move a character into the back off your second battle. If you trigger a standby on the 3rd battle, which doesn't always happen, but you can now standby into the open slot in the front row and have gotten 3 attack value during your battle phase. So clean cut has that little bit of a thing there, and it's obviously you have to specifically trigger standby on a certain battle, so it's not consistent. But having that available is actually kind of nice. So definitely still like an MVP card in SAO. It's also like SAO standby is definitely like a go second deck too because we don't have any powerful go first plays. Your best go first play is like slamming down one of these, peeling an extra card, and hopefully triggering a standby. Or typically your best go first play, if it's not this, is just literally slamming down a standby and passing. So 3 of this to peel standby. If you open it, you get basically an extra check for a standby. Next up, 3 copies of Amagi. Amagi is really neat. It loads your grave up for good standby targets. It's also an extra 1k pump on opponent's turn when you use act, specifically counters. So you get your 1/0 counter into like 3k range, or 1k splittable, and sometimes 1k is enough to blank all 3 of your opponent's swings, and you're winning defensively on all 3 lanes. So this card's actually pretty good. Also really nice is just drawing this in the early game helps you get out of first deck, and like standby starts to really snowball comes second deck, level 2 typically. So just getting yourself out of that game state, super useful. But mainly there to load up, your grave for good standby targets. I do trim down some of the level 2 standby targets, and so getting enough mill to find them in the deck is pretty important. Next up, I got 2 copies of Brainstorm, just more mill, and this is from. Oh, actually, this is a new card. So yeah, there is a second new card besides the standby. So this is a tap self search Brainstorm from the new set that also has spammable pay 1, gives something 2000 power. So this is really nice because, you know, just tap, self search, brainstorm, more mill. It also, so sometimes you'll trigger a standby second card deep, like you do 3 attacks and you'll have a second card deep. You have a brainstorm that can also pay an extra stock to effectively pay out the standby climax and, you know, keep refreshing with 8. So this card's actually pretty good. It was probably, the effect on the brainstorm is probably one of the better effects a standby SAO variant could have gotten. And you know, 2000 pump is nice too because, you know, standby decks want to win offensively so they can win defensively as well. And 2K offensively is useful for that. So there is actually a new card. It's an uncommon, so I forgot about it. No, it's a rare, sorry. But it's actually pretty good. It's a pretty good addition to the deck. Because we have the brainstorm now. 2 copies of the Silica Back Row, kind of interchangeable a lot of the time. Silica Back Row is obviously still really good to recycle your counter, which is like the main use of it. It's also really good because it assigns the ability to the card, and then if it leaves the field from like you triggering a standby to call over it, you still get to use the skill. So, you know, the effect lingers, so it kind of works nicely in a 8 standby variant. But yeah, just mainly to recycle counters. Helps you also it's just actual selection, right? If you're just relying on Amagis all the time for pluses and standbys, you're not actually getting true selection to the hand. And now that we don't have any gates, we were playing 8 standby, this card being able to pick a card to add to our hand is still an MVP. Speaking of selection, we got also 2 drop searchers. You know, drop searcher is just a really good selection card. You play this one because it also has an on attack scry, or shout outs to Ryan Wibberley, surveil, so top check, leave it on top or mill. That's just, it's good because it's just kind of like the Silica where you get an extra check turn 1 for a standby trigger. But other than that, it's just a selection card from the deck. It's good to have because your deck isn't built on selection, so having like a couple of these selection tools, pretty useful stuff. That is 16 zeros, lower 0 count because you want to play like a slower 0 game. You don't mind if your opponent is like playing slow as well, like say you go first, you attack once, or you don't attack at all, your opponent attacks once. You're totally okay with that because you can get an extra turn to set up stuff, which is what standby decks really, really want. Going to level 1, a lot of standby decks have 1/1s. The beauty of SAO, I feel like, is we play this one instead, and I know some people have switched to 1/1s in some Japanese lists, but I think this one is still a lot better because the fact that it has an accelerate salvage. If you standby this out turn 1 into turn 2, you can already start accruing like pluses, selected pluses by the way, because it's a selected salvage. This card is just really, really good, and it's like not even small, right? It's 6K. Obviously you're not 7.5, but I think SAO standby is a 2/2 to 3/2 more weighted standby deck, right? Some standby decks are actually really 1/1 weighted, but this deck is really weighted towards the 2/2s and the 3/2s. So just being able to like have something like this that you can actually slap down without paying stock, and also use its ability to get pluses for free, is something that I like much better than a 1/1 standby. So I think this one works out much better for me. It's definitely not even small. Like if you have the Amagi in the back, or if you standby out a card I'll show in a bit, these cards are just as big as 1/1s almost, and you don't mind them being like that, a little bit smaller, because you're trying to lead into 2/2s and 3/2s anyways. And next up, 2 of the counter. This is the promo art, but the old one is the same ability. Yeah, just 1/0 2K splittable counter is something this deck has that other standby decks just don't. So actually really, really nice. Makes you win defensively here, makes you win defensively throughout the whole game. And that's all I have to say about it. It's just really nice that SAO gets to be a little bit unique as a standby deck by having this. And these. So 3 of this money counter and 3 of this money counter. They're the same money counter, but their names are different. So you can actually play up to 8. So actually they're not the same money counter. But yeah, you can play 8 money counters in SAO. You play 6 because 8 gets to borderline like turbo inconsistent mode. Because like your Silicas are whiffing a lot more, your Amagis might whiff, and your draws in the early game could get clunky when you play 8. So I think 6 is the number that I'm most like, this is what I like. It lets me, you know, typically consistently have it around like 2 to 3 standbys by the end game, and sorry, not standbys, money counters slash anti-damage. And when you have 2 to 3 of these in your hand, you basically can't lose to like a bulk majority of end games. And so they still have to go for these end games, keep in mind, because if they're not even trying to go for it, like trying to play around your money's achieved what they are in the deck to do without even needing to play them. So opponent has to use their finishers, and when they try to use their finishers and you have monies, they decompress themselves, and you can then kill them afterwards because you had money. So this is like the one standby deck that does have access to like as many of this tool as possible, and so these two things are what makes it very, very unique. I think the fact that you can just hoard these in hand, and you're playing a standby deck that wins field, so you don't need to ever have useful cards in your hand, is like the selling point of SAO standby. So yeah, 6 copies of the money counters, and yeah, I think 6 is the right number, by the way. You could try 7. I've tried 7. It gets a little bit clunky. And yeah. Next up we have, I'm not sure if I can fit everything when I lay it out like this. I'm gonna try 2 copies of the 2/2 standby. This one is really good. It's one of the best standby 2/2s that they've ever made, in my opinion, because if your opponent can triple power through your lanes, this can just pay 1 to rest itself, and that's actually really, really good. It means like when you have like a board orientation like 2 of these and 1 of these, and your opponent can actually kill all 3 lanes. They're like less incentivized to even do that because they have to invest searches, stock, and playmaking to kill the 3 lanes, but you're still getting this back. So they like can't justify it. If they do it, it's like net. It's not that good for them because you're just getting this back anyways. This 2-soul beater. So I like this one a lot. I don't need more than 2 because this effect gets worse if you summon a second one. Having 1 on the board is the max amount of value you can get to use the effect. So if you're playing like 3 or something, the other ones are just 10-5 cards, and it's like you just really need to only field 1. You're milling quite a bit with the Magis, hopefully, to find it in drop for like a level 1 standby play. But if you whiff on it, it's fine. You just make level 3 standby plays at level 2. 1 copy of this card. This card is actually like the true MVP. This is like way better to standby out than this a lot of the time if you have fields of like a lot of 1/0s. What this card does, it's a 1k global assist, global support assist, just global 1k, and your center lane gets hand encore. So if you standby out this, it makes these into 7k bodies. The center one even has hand encore, and that's just really good. When you scale into like level 2 and level 3, this card is still good because center lane hand encore means your opponent like. It means all your standby cards in the center lane have hand encore, which is really, really good. You can even do some cheeky things where you end up standbying like some card that you need in the back row the next turn, like the 3/2 Asana in the center, then hand encore it, and then put it back into the back row next turn, and then move this one up and then pivot that way. So this card is really, really good. This card is actually probably like one of the better cards. Yeah, definitely I think better than standbying out the 2/2 a lot of the time if I have access to it. Only 1 because it is definitely like a super clunky card. If you have 2, it's basically second copy is like completely useless. So yeah. Next up, 3s I have 1 Leafa. This is 15 global, right? It's pretty good. It's a good card to if you coincidentally trigger standby at 2 to replace something on your board with, and it goes in the front row. Gives the other 2 1k power, 1/5 power, sorry. And you can even it can give itself hexproof with its effect, so you can play around stuff like monies and stuff. It's actually really good as a one-off. It's kind of like Silica where you don't really need more than 1. The second copy is like really, really bricky, but 1 is like super, super MVP. Next up, 2 Yuis. Now that you have 8 standby, getting out Yui at level 2 isn't just a pipe dream, and then you can start scrying at level 2. And then when you do standby out 1 at level 2, it's very inconsistent to get it to hand if you need it for a stock swap effect. So you have to play 2 copies. Like I would probably play 1 of this if it wasn't also a like important piece to stop like your opponent from like going hyper compressed. Like if you actually standby this out at 2 and it's now on your field and it's hard for you to get at level 3, you're kind of screwed. So 2 copies is very important, so that you can still play 1 at level 3 if you are given the chance. So yeah, 2 copies of this, and you have like 8 blue. So it's actually pretty. Like your tertiary color is definitely, you want to get blue in for level 3. It's not yellow, you never need yellow because the only yellow card that you're ever summoning is this, and you're always summoning it off triggering standby. The 2k support that has memory kick. This card is, I mean, it's just a 2k support. Every standby deck that has a 2k support wants to play 2 copies of it just to make your board super, super beefy for the end game. So yeah, 2 of this. If I can fit the rest like this onto the camera, yeah. And then the other standby target slash level 3s is 3 of this healer, 3 of this healer. This one's obviously better standby because it's 11k always, basically, and your opponent can't use backups on its battle, so you're like picking apart your opponent's board when you attack with this at level 2. And you know, it's just they're all healers as well. You have 6 monies, so you are usually surviving even if you're 3-1 or 3-2, but you know, after surviving at 3-1 or 3-2 and then healing back down to 3-0, usually you can just close out games. It's like a wrap. So having 6 healers, I like that. Having an early play healer that's 1 costed, I like that because it helps me save stock for money counters. And yeah, that's the top end. There's no finisher. A lot of really good standby decks like Data Live actually have finishers as well, but you know, I guess this deck's finisher is kind of surviving longer than those decks because you have access to monies, and that's where your finishing stock is spent on, right? Staying alive for longer, and you can generally do that with the 6 money counters you are playing. And then finally, you know, for climaxes, it's 4 of this standby. This is the best standby art for sure, without a doubt. And then 4 of this new one. I like this art because the scene is just hilarious. It's like kind of cringe. The scene in the anime with this dude is super cringe, and I just like this art. It's like the climax is really beautiful. But there's actually a 3rd standby. You could also play with like people with swords and stuff. So yeah, that's the list. Definitely try it out. Obviously not as exciting because you're not playing a lot of the new Alicization cards, but this is definitely the deck that, from old SAO stuff, that got the most buff from Alicization Volume 2. Just getting access to the 4 new standbys and I guess the Brainstorm really solidifies like the deck's game plan. When before it was 4 standby, 4 gate, you were like inconsistently triggering standby and you would lose games off of kind of inconsistently triggering those. But now getting standby triggered and drawn is very consistent, and it kind of changes the dynamic of this deck. Makes it actually a lot better than it was before. So yeah, that's the deck profile. Try it out. Make sure to check out the SBTCG Twitch stream for, you know, gameplay and you know, card reviews when we do those on the best ever Weiss Schwarz set review show. So yeah, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's Weiss signing off.